back to Inside the Box. I'm Joanna Lee, and we are in the fourth episode of 2021's Asian Heritage Month series. Today's guest artist is a Daegum player and a percussionist for the Korean Traditional Music Association of Canada. Currently, he is serving as the president of the Korean Traditional Music Association of Canada and is the leader of the Korean fusion band Jangdan. He has toured across Canada with the All-TV Culture Caravan and East Coast Canada with world music players led by Korean composer, Daegum player, and Samulnori musician, Serin. Please give a warm welcome to Taewook Lee. Hi, John. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Hi, Joanna. Nice to meet you. It's wonderful to be here.
So, I was wondering, how did you get started with Korean percussion and the Daegum, and what is your origin story?
Well, it's something that my mom tells the story about a lot, but I honestly can't remember. So when we were in Korea, when I was like 6 or 7, they had these like cultural centers or like community centers, right? And then every week they would have a free concert by some musician. And, you know, it would be Western artists and then like jazz artists and then like opera singers. And I guess one day it was this, it was a Korean traditional musician with, and I think it was like this young boy who was playing, and they called him like a prodigy, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess I was affected by that. I honestly don't remember, but so when I went into grade 1, I started playing Samulnori in the after-school programs that we had. And so we had the drum, and then we immigrated to Canada when I was in grade 2. And we brought the drum along, and my mom found a great teacher here in Toronto named Chris Beck. And I've been learning from him ever since. And yeah, it's been about, I guess, almost 20 years that I've been playing Korean percussion. As for the Daegum, you know, it was like I always found it very, very cool as a young kid. That was when I was first exposed to it, and I just wanted to play that. And I was playing Western flute at the time at school, so it was kind of a baby step, just to learn the Korean flute as well.
So, can you tell me more about the history of Samulnori and your instruments?
Yes. So Samulnori is not as old as people think it is. People see a bunch of traditional instruments and they assume that it's been played for hundreds of years. But it was only very recently, like in the 70s. So the original members of Samulnori was Kim Deok-soo 선생님, who everybody knows the name if you're Korean. And then we had Lee Kwang-soo 선생님, 최종실 선생님, and Kim Yong-bae 선생님. And unfortunately, the last Kim Yong-bae 선생님 passed away quite quickly after the formation of Samulnori. But yes, that was it. They took the rhythms of traditional farmer percussions called 풍물, and 풍물 is originally played upright with drums attached to the body, and you would have a bunch of people and they would go around the town or the small village. And what those teachers did, or those masters did, was they took that rhythm and they polished it and they edited down to a 15-20 minute piece that they could put on stage. Mm-hmm. And this was when they were touring. And Samulnori is actually the name of that group. So it was the name of those four. It was the name of the band, but it became ubiquitous and it became the name of the genre of music instead. That is the history of Samulnori, and of course, it became very popular.
About your instruments, can you tell me more about the background and the history and the detail behind them, and what kind of percussion instrument you started on?
Yes. So I started on the jangu, and that is considered the basic instrument when it comes to Korean traditional music, even for melodic instrument uh, musicians. They would usually take a class in the jangu to learn the traditional rhythms of traditional Korean rhythms. So in Samulnori, the four instruments all represent different uh, elements of nature. So the very basic one is the bass drum called buk, and that one represents the clouds. And the jangu, it has two sides, a bass side and a slightly more treble snare-ish side, and that jangu represents rain.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have two metal instruments called the jing and gengari. Jing is a large gong, and that represents the wind. And the gengari represents thunder. And so together, it can be spiritual, and there are ties to a lot of history in that as well, in the instruments.
That's very interesting. Moving on, do you mind giving a demonstration of the instruments for our audiences, if you have them?
Sure, I'll just show you a couple of the instruments I have here. Okay, so we're gonna start with this one. All right, so this is the jangu. So if you can see here, it has two sides. Over here. And there are these strings in the middle that can be tightened, and we keep them loose when we're storing them, and then when we play, we tighten them up to get the desired pitch of the instruments. So this is usually made from horse hide and sometimes cowhide, and on the rare occasion some dog hide as well. Yes, not very popular nowadays. It used to be for a while, but a lot of it is horse now. Yeah, so it's shaped like an hourglass. It has a bass side and a treble side. Guess, yeah, it's one of the prettier percussion instruments, in my opinion. I might be biased. So a lot of Korean rhythm is in threes. So a lot of it is just different tempos of the same basic structure, which is four groups of three. So we go 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. And when that's slow, we call that jungmori, and that's about 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2. It's about that speed. And then if it gets faster, it's called jungjungmori. And then we have a gutgori, which is slightly faster. And then we have jajinmori, which is faster than that. And that's the fastest of that rhythm. So that one would go 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, something like that. And then we do have a couple of 4 beats, like even beats as well. We have Himori, which is the most popular, well known. That's when they go dong dong dagung dong dong dagung. And then there's also 동살풀이, it also has 4 beats. But one of the really unique rhythms in Korean rhythm is called chilche. And it's one of my favorites. It's crazy and it's just very very complex, and it just really makes you wonder how anyone came up with that. So I'll explain it. It's a total of 36 beats, but the way it's arranged is just, it doesn't make any sense. So it's arranged by 5, 5, 11, 5, and 10. And it's a truly Korean rhythm. That one is, I don't think you can find anything like that anywhere in the world. That's the general overview of all the rhythms we have in Korean percussion.
That's very cool. Can you tell us more about the terms? I know you used sound like onomatopoeia to do.
Yes.
Can you use onomatopoeia to actually talk about some of the ones that you say when you perform the jangdan?
Okay. Is there anyone in particular that you would want to know more about?
The last one, and
the last one, okay.
Yeah, that's all that kind of caught my mind. And
sure. So that one goes dong da kung dong da kung dong da kung da kung da kung dong da kung dong dong da kung da kung. That's one. So we break it down by 3s and 2s within those larger blocks as well. So it's 3, 2, dong, do, kung. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Dong, do, kung, dong, do, kung, dong, do, kung, do, kung, do, kung, dong, do, kung, dong, dong, do, kung, do, kung. So this is the Daegum. Can you see the Daegum? So it's made out of bamboo, and it's made out of a special type of bamboo only found in Korea, apparently. So one of the hallmarks of this is that there are alternating ridges on the bamboo. So there's one over here, and on this side, it's over here. And then it's over here. So these ridges are one of the hallmarks of good bamboo. They say it's a little more dense than regular bamboo, which gives it a more deeper sound. It's actually quite long, longer than a Western flute, and it requires a lot of hand stretching to actually reach all the holes, because they don't have, like these holes here. They don't have any pedals or anything like that with the flute. And here is the most distinguishing part of the Daegum, this thing right here. So that's called the chum. And what that does, it vibrates on certain notes, and it gives it the unique, really unique characteristic in terms of sound for the Daegum.
Pretty cool. What would you say, like, in comparison to the voice? Would you say it's like a deeper voice when you, like a deeper range when you play it, or is it more of a soprano range?
So in terms of range, I'm just going to compare it with the Western flute again. It's pretty similar. So flutes, what was it? It would be like a C flute, right? So this one is in B flat. Even like, I mean, traditionally it wasn't B flat, it was very close to B flat, but nowadays they make them kind of fit into the Western chromatic scale. So this is a B flat flute. It has about 2.5 octaves. So it starts at the same, and then it can't go quite as high. But so it starts at a B flat and it goes up to about an F, high F, or a high G, about that much. But in terms of the characteristic, it's a lot more round, I want to say, and sort of it has a slightly more breathy characteristic. Yeah, and not quite as clean, but I guess that's the appeal of this instrument to me. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. It's very rustic, and it definitely has a very unique element to it. And I guess it's very patriotic of the Koreans to incorporate that particular type of bamboo.
Yeah, I mean, just between you and me, it could be, who knows if that's true. I mean, I'm sure it's true, but Asians have that kind of thing, right? Where they're, well, ours is the best, and yeah.
Well, the same could be traced back to the ukulele, right? The Hawaiians, well, the native Hawaiians actually say that koa wood is actually unique to Hawaii, and therefore it's the best wood for the ukulele. So I think every country has its national patriotic pride.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. Yeah. And the funny thing about this thing too, so this the chung here, yeah, that's made up from the inside of a reed. So those like reeds with the fluffy things up top. If you cut that open, inside there's a membrane, and you take that, and that's what this is. So I tried to make it with some Canadian reeds. So I went down to a park in Toronto, and I cut down some reeds, and I brought it home to try it. But it didn't have quite the thickness or the characteristics. It wasn't as robust as this one. But I wanted to make it work, because then it'd be like Korean bamboo, but with like a Canadian like heart in of the instrument, and it could be a nice metaphor, but unfortunately I couldn't make it work.
Well, you tried.
Yeah.
Speaking of your origin story, going back to it, what was your experience like when you immigrated to Canada?
I didn't really have that much hard of a time. I went to ESL. I watched a lot of TV shows with subtitles on, which I guess helped me with the spelling. And I didn't come here too late, where like I could still, I'm pretty fluent in English. But I didn't come here too early, where I lost all my Korean. Yeah, and because I kept playing Korean instruments, I was always surrounded by other Korean people, and I think that gave me, something to root myself onto, where I could stay grounded, and I wasn't too confused about my identity.
Mm-hmm. That's great. At least you had people, like-minded people surrounding you, and that's always a bonus, especially when you're in a new country.
Yeah, for sure.
So, in comparison to Korea, what was it like to resume your Korean percussion studies in Canada with Chris Pick? And what was it like to learn Samulnori at that time?
Yes, so I can't really say that I learned Korean percussion in Korea meaningfully, because everything I learned from Chris, and it was I was really fortunate to have met such a great teacher, and such a generous teacher as well, and he taught me everything that he knew. He didn't hold back. And maybe one thing that was different is that in Korea, a lot of people learn Samulnori, and here, that wasn't really the case, right? At that time, maybe there were two Samulnori groups in Canada, and I guess in a smaller pool, I was more seen. I was one of the better students as well, if I'm being honest. And I think that really gave me the confidence to keep trying and just continue and really just see what I could do.
Absolutely. That's great, though. You still took your culture back to Canada with you and resumed, and it's always going to be a part of you. So for that, I mean, it's very culturally enriching.
Yeah, I always said whenever people ask me, they were like, or whenever I talk to people who I haven't talked to in a while, they're like, "Oh, are you still doing that Korean percussion thing?" And I'm like, "I'll always do it. I'll never stop." But you know, I've stopped for the past year, and it's I would like to say it has affected my life not being able to play, but honestly, I'm not. It's not too. Life goes on, I guess, but yeah, I do miss it.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't played it for over a year, so hopefully you'll be able to do it soon. I think with the vaccine, everything seems a bit more hopeful.
Yeah. Actually, I somebody who was doing who was writing a stage play about the Comfort Woman. They reached out to me, and well, because you told me you also did your master's on that. Was that right?
I am part of a group called Artemis Musician Society.
Mm-hmm.
And, I actually did a Comfort Woman project.
Project, right? Okay, I see. Yeah, and they reached out to me, and they're in Montreal, and they were inviting me to the workshop, and I was like, yes, I get to play Korean music for the first time in forever, and I'm very looking forward to that. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention it to you because you told me that you also were in that area, right?
Yeah. That's amazing. I think the Comfort Women, deserve the respect that should have been given to them. And I think
for sure.
They've never received apologies or retribution. And it wasn't for money that they wanted retribution. It was the acknowledgement of these crimes being done to them. And it's an ongoing issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that sounds very exciting. Can you tell me more about this play, or is it sort of in the works and you're...
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but she didn't really. Apparently it's supposed to go on stage next winter. So there, I guess she finished the script, and it was a powerful script. It was two women who were the main focus of the play, and it was a Japanese woman who lost her husband in the war, and a Korean comfort woman, and there's a lot of very abstract and interpretational, but it was pretty powerful. But they're still in the workshopping phase, I believe, and they're trying to see how they can incorporate Korean music and Korean dance into the play to, I guess, give it more authenticity and more life. So hopefully that's what I'll be able to help. Hopefully. That's the goal.
I mean, if you have the training and you've been doing it for most of your life, so I mean, that's great.
Yeah. Excited to see what happens with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll have to keep me in the loop. I would love to know more about it later on.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great to go see something live in a theater?
Absolutely. Yeah. Until then, I guess we have to do the safe social distancing protocols, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of performances, let's talk about your experiences with the World Music Players. What was that like? And your touring and why you joined?
Sure. That must have been when I was in grade 8. I was young, and it was like 2006. We had a group here in Toronto with a lot of older musicians from Korea, and we made a band, a group, and we had some performances. And one of the younger musicians was Serin Hong, and he played Daegum, and he played percussion as well. And he was going to Fanshawe College for, I'm not sure, composition or something like that. And he was just, it was very new for me because up until that point, I only had Chris as a teacher. So for about 6-7 years, and it was like, oh, here's this younger guy, and he has different ideas about how to do certain things. So I was very, very hooked. And it's teachers are a scarce resource in Canada in terms of traditional music. So I had to really take what I can get. But I was still lucky because he was a great musician. He taught me a lot of things, and there were a number of us learning from Chris at the time who joined with Saren to the World Music Players. And yeah, it was like a step up for all of us, where we could see it's like an eye-opening experience. Yeah.
Sounds amazing, and sounds like a life-changing experience, especially in your teens.
Yeah, for sure. It was pretty cool. Yeah. We would take the Greyhound. Did you hear do you know about Greyhound?
Yes.
Yeah, apparently they're shutting down. Yeah, so we would take the Greyhound to London, and we would stay over at his house, and we would have concerts, and we would make all the pamphlets, and we would do all the bindings, and it was just yeah, it was a good time.
Speaking of touring, what was it like to tour all across Canada in 2 weeks, and how did you get involved in this program?
Program was by All TV, which is a Korean network in Canada. So one of the project leaders for the Caravan used to work with Saren for World Music Players, and he was like the touring manager at the time, and now he's gone to do bigger and better things. But he was involved with the project, and he let me know about it. It was at a time in my life where I wanted to try some new things, step outside my comfort zone, I guess. So I talked with him, and then I auditioned for the program, and I guess it didn't get a lot of attention in Toronto because I was the only one from Toronto to go, and so there were 12 people in total, and I was the only one from Toronto, and the rest were from Vancouver. And we had singers, we had a traditional dancer, we had taekwondo masters, and we had other percussion players that were from Vancouver. And it's like me getting because I've never been to Korea since I came here, which is strange for somebody playing Korean music, I think. But it's like I was in this little well, and for the first time I got to play with other people from, well, it was in Canada, but still, like, it was outside of my little neighborhood, and it was very, a lot of it was very collaborative. We had a lot of creative input. The manager, the production manager, his name's Peter. They came up with a very good overarching storyline for our concert. So we would do a concert in every major city in Canada, and it would be about an hour and a half, and we would try to incorporate all the singing, all the traditional dancing, and the music as well. And towards the end of it, I think we did make a very good production. Yeah, there's a video of it on YouTube if you want to go watch. Yeah, our final one was in Toronto, and we opened for Yuna. Do you know Yuna? She's a Korean singer.
Yes.
Yeah, and we got to meet her too, and it was very good, very exciting. I was a big fan. So we went to all the major cities in all the provinces, and I remember we went to Charlottetown, and it was not a big performance. They didn't really have a big venue either, but every place we went, we would try to get somebody local in that area to open for us. So we would have, so in Winnipeg we had like a dance troupe who performed before we performed. In Vancouver there was a Nanta group who performed before we did, and in Charlottetown there was a Samulnori group, and yeah, and they played for us. They played before us, and it was in this school gym, and like they had like 5 instruments that they've been using for years, and like whenever the older brothers were done with it and they go off to university in Ontario, like the younger kids would take those same instruments and they would play it, and then like it was just like handed down apparently.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and yeah, it was very, I don't know the word to describe it. It was very, it had an impact on me, and none of these kids knew how to maintain the instruments either. So like, because it's leather, it will stretch out over time, and because they're new to sea, it's very humid, so that also affects the sound. And so after the performance, I just took all their instruments and I tightened them up, and like, I don't know, it's just, give them a little something, I guess. But it was very, very, very impactful. It just, in that little corner that these little kids are carrying on that music.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, just one little simple gesture would affect someone's life. That's a random act of kindness, and that's great that you showed that in such a small community that obviously needed a little bit of, or a little bit of TLC.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful and touching. What was it like when you were in Yukon and Northwest Territories? I've always wanted to travel there, but I've never.
Yeah, no, we didn't get to go there, unfortunately. Yeah, I think we worked our bus driver half to death, but if we added those in, I don't think we could have. Yeah, it was crazy because it was like not even 2 weeks. It was like 10 cities in like 12 days. And we would sleep on the bus and wake up and then perform, and then we would leave, and then like it was just like always on. And we got like 1 day of break in somewhere near Thunder Bay, and it was laundry day. So everybody would so halfway through we would it was this really small motel by the highway, and we walked down to the laundromat, and we put our clothes in, and me and the traditional dancer, her name's Youngju. She's doing well in Vancouver, and we made kimchi bokkeumbap.
Ooh, that's
yeah. And it was just like a nice little moment of respite. It was chaos, but yeah, that was very good.
You can't go without that type of food, especially when you're home, right?
For sure, yeah. But yeah, I do want to go to Yukon, go see the Northern Lights or something. But
that would be awesome. I've always wanted to discover different parts of Canada, but unfortunately, I've only seen elements of like small bits and pieces there, but I haven't gone as far as touring all of Canada, say.
Yeah. I think that was the first time I've seen mountains since I came to Toronto, because there's a lot of mountains in Korea, right? And then I came to Toronto, which has no mountains, and then that was the first time I went to Vancouver, and like it was just so nice, and I realized I missed that, and the Rockies were beautiful, and then the prairies were boring. It was just yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow, that must have been still a pretty amazing trip, because you got to see most of Canada.
Yeah.
A span of 10 days. I mean, that's amazing. And yes, your bus driver must have been super exhausted.
Yes, I'm not entirely sure of the legalities of if he was allowed to drive that much, but yeah, he was a trooper.
Thank you for sharing all that, by the way. I appreciate your story. Yeah. So moving on, I'd like to go back to your experiences on the Daegum. What attracted you to that instrument, and how did you find the transition of learning a new Korean instrument outside of percussion?
Well, I always liked melodic instruments. Like piano never really made sense to me. Like guitar it's hard to make sense of that. Like I can't. It's hard to play instruments that can make more than one sound at the same time for me. So I prefer melodies, and I played flute since grade 6 for my school orchestra, and so it was like a natural transition. After I saw the instrument, I just knew that I wanted to play that one day. So I started with a plastic Daegum. So they usually make them out of plastic because the wooden ones are so expensive.
Oh yeah.
So as for beginners, you just start with the plastic, and it's like $20 for a plastic one, but like proper flute is like $2,000, $3,000, right? So I started with a plastic one, but I don't think it was a very good plastic one.
Yeah.
So I never could get the right sounds on it, and so I was just for a while I was just like, am I just not meant to play this instrument? Because the thing is, so it's different than a normal flute, where this I'm not sure what you would call this in.
I guess
the mouthpiece, I guess you could. Yes, yeah, but this is much larger than a flute.
yeah.
So it has to be covered about 2/3 of the way with the lower lip, and then you blow into it. and this edge right here needs to be very, very sharp in order to produce a clean sound. But I think the one I had was slightly rounded in that edge, and I could just never get that sound. So for the longest time, I was like, I guess this is not for me. And when so I was just playing percussion a lot, and I would try to play it, to play the daegum, once in a while, but I wasn't really I wasn't making any progress. But there was for a while, the Korean Center in Toronto here, they had a program where they would invite teachers, musicians from Korea, and have them teach their instruments for 2 to 3 months here, and then they would go back. So they had Samulnori teachers, and then one year they had a Daegum musician come in, and he turns out to be a friend of Serin from Korea as well. So like they went to school together or something, so they knew each other. And so he brought a lot of plastic daegums, and they were, I guess, slightly more better quality than the one I had before. And so after that, I started picking it up. And at the time, I'm not sure, what was I doing? I think I was going to school, but so he would have classes, he would have weekly classes, but he would have like different levels of classes for different instruments. So he had like a tanso class, which is like a Korean recorder, and then the daegum class, and then he also taught taepyeongso.
Oh.
Yeah, so and the different instruments had different levels, so they had beginner and intermediate, right? So even though I was going to school at the time, I would just show up almost every day with him, just to learn from him, because it's teachers are a scarce resource here, and I wanted to get as much out of it before he had to leave. Yeah, so he taught me the daegum. His name was Hwang Kyung-ho. He taught me, there are two types of daegum actually, and there's the classic daegum and then like the jazz daegum, if you want to look at it roughly. So he taught me the classic daegum. So classic daegum has 2 holes here, and it's slightly longer. So this is called 정악 daegum. And he taught me this one, and a little bit of the taepyeongso. Yeah, and then then he left, and I had a plastic daegum, so I had to get a real daegum.
Yeah.
So I bought one from Korea. No, I didn't buy one from Korea. What happened was, my parents knew somebody from the church who had a daegum, and it was just sitting in their basement for like years and years. So I bought that one off of them, and then I started playing, and that's when Korean Traditional Music Association formed, and I would play daegum for our group there. And then for a while that's what happened. And the second type of daegum that I learned, it's called sanjo daegum. And our previous president, he was a piri player. His name is Jung Han-soo. And his old friend was also a piri player, but then he wanted to learn the daegum, so he became a daegum player. And then he won like a bunch of awards because he was really good. And then now he's a conductor. But his family was here in London, so and he was here for like maybe 6 months.
Mhm.
And so our president told me, he's like, oh, you should go learn from this guy. And I'm like, okay, yes, thank you, please. So I would drive every week. I would drive to London for an hour class, and then I would drive back. And I did that for about 2-3 months. And yeah, that's how I learned Santo Daegum. And I don't know, it's just something about the sound that really, really speaks to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so cool that each instrument has a different type of prototype, and there's the common ones, and there's, you know, relatives of
Yeah.
the instruments.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, for the rest of your question, where it's different from percussion. Percussion, the proper way to teach it, they say, is through repetition. So I've never had a sheet music for percussion. But when I started with the Daegum, they did have sheet music, and it's written in Chinese.
Oh.
So it's not written on the staff. It's written. So each character represents a tone, and then you would have like little modifiers for octaves. Yeah, so reading that was interesting, and just learning because Korean music doesn't really have any chords.
No.
And it's hard to find any semblance of a chorus either. There's no real, like, the structure is hard to find.
For most instruments, right? Except maybe the samwang, the mouth
Mhm.
organ.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, you're right. There's not any chords being formed on an individual instrument, but there are chords formed as a harmony.
Mhm. Yeah, and even the harmony part, because a lot of traditional Korean music, they play in unison. They don't play different notes. So yeah, it's a very different type of music, and it takes some getting used to, I think. Yeah, but a lot of it, because when we play Samulnori, we're not defined by a tempo. So of course, we have to keep the beat to a certain extent, but a lot of it becomes interpretive, and it becomes a way to express the piece through slight tightening of the tempo and slightly loosening it. But playing different instruments, that kind of, we have to stick to a little more. We have to stick to the beat a little bit more. Yeah. And then I realized, when I was playing with my band, because I was playing percussion and then I transitioned to the Daegum. When I would listen to the percussion, I can hear them speeding up. I can hear them slowing down. And I was like, oh, is this what I've been doing the whole time? I'm like, I'm so sorry.
So you're the gatekeeper of the beats, and they need to see you.
I try to be, yeah.
Yeah. So curious, how did you form your band?
How did I form my band? So the band we have now is a lot different from the band we had before. Before I took over, we had a lot more older musicians. I don't know. I didn't intend it that way, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's something with Korean culture where
You pass on
when
your generation.
yeah, I guess. And then like the older people kind of step back so that I can so the younger people can lead and or maybe or like it's what's the word? Like it's yeah, it's like for my benefit that they take a step back because they don't want to intrude is how I took that because after I took over a lot of our older musicians were they left and I mean I didn't want them to leave and I was it wasn't like I cut them but like that's just what ended up happening and I think that it was them looking out for me and giving me the space to really do what I want with the group. Yeah, so when it was in the older group, we did have some jazz musicians, and after I took over, I brought in more of that. So we have a jazz pianist, we have a jazz drummer, we have a jazz guitarist, a jazz bassist. So a lot of it is jazz. And I find that that does go well together with Korean music just because, well, my genre of Korean percussion is very improvisational. We have a lot of room to play, and they know they're on like that's their area of expertise as well. Yeah, and I just met a really nice person. The drummer, his name is Jason, and he had a lot of musician friends as well. So he brought in a lot of the people, and they happened to be all Korean, and it's all like, and we're all kind of that 1.5 generation where we're not completely Korean or completely Canadian, and that's what I want our band to be, and sort of looking through that, sort of expressing our identity as Korean and Canadians with music that's both Korean and Canadian. And I think it's hard to do that genuinely when you're on one side or the other. Like you kind of have to be straddling that mark in order to just for that to come from a genuine place. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do with my band right now. Yeah.
That's so cool and totally relatable because I grew up in a very Korean household and my mom was actually a Korean language school teacher. Her major actually was Korean literature, so she really implemented the Korean culture in my upbringing, and I just gained a natural interest in Korean dance, traditional Korean music, and yeah, that's pretty awesome what you're doing with the group now and incorporating that. Would you say you're open to even future generations of musicians, that like a generation that might come after you? Would you say that you would also step back in your role a little bit to give them a bit more space, or would you try to welcome them in the sense and have them be heard in their own way?
I would like to say that I would step back. Yeah, I think I would look forward to that, and have to like really give them a sense of like ground them in Korean music, and then let them do what they want, because ultimately, like, it wasn't always like this for me, but lately I've been thinking more about who we are as Asians, who we are as Korean Canadians, and I just want this music to be able to represent that. And I would want, the future generation to be able to do that as well.
Well, this is Canada, and freedom of expression is one of the laws, right? The rights, actually, not laws.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So, I wanted to go back to your current leadership role as the president and how you got involved.
Well, I was always kind of involved. So the bones of this organization has existed for, I guess, about 15 years now. So we got started around 2006, and at that time it was a lot of older musicians.
Yeah.
And then and we were playing older music too, and we had less Western instruments, less Western musicians, and we got incorporated as a organization, as a corporation, in 2015. And I guess I was really just there to play music at the beginning. I didn't really want to do any of the administration stuff or any of the legwork, but I guess it was because I was the youngest one there, and in kind of in Korean culture, it's like you pile on the youngest one. So I was doing a lot of things here and there, organizing some events, and one of our last annual concerts in 2016, I pretty much organized all of it, and it just, and I liked doing that too. It was fun because it's like event planning kind of, and it's like it's a puzzle, right?
Absolutely.
You gotta set the stage in a certain way where it makes sense, and you gotta make the program where you don't move too many people around, but it also has to make sense and it has to flow. And that I enjoyed that, and I got kind of invested in that too. And it was one event with the Small World Music Center in downtown Toronto. They have a Asian music festival every May, and one year I talked to them and we organized the event, and I had set up most of it, and this was when I wasn't president, and when I came, and so as we were setting up, the president gave his input on how we should be set up on that day. And of course he has more experience, of course, and I still get attached to what my vision was and how I had seen it, and it was kind of I guess it's a little childish of me at that time that I couldn't let that go. And I think this is just in my head, where it was at that point where they're like, okay, why don't you try? Like, then you do it.
Yes.
And the following year, the previous president, he had all his kids moved out. They went to college, and like they were thinking about downsizing. So in that mm, in that vein, he stepped away from the group, and he like appointed me to be the next president, and yeah, and that's how it happened. And that was hard too, because like I was just there to play music, and to have to take on that role suddenly, it was a little difficult. And I never majored in music, and it's kind of like I don't know if I should be the one to direct these group of musicians. And for a while, my leadership was I had no leadership. Like I can see that now. At the time, I was thinking that, oh, I would let my talented bandmates do what they want, because I trust them, which I do. But it's kind of, I didn't really have a vision of what I wanted our group to be, and I let a lot of our members take that on. But like I shouldn't have done that. And then it became more clear to me as time went on that I want this group and our music to be about who we are and about our identity, and how the east and west kind of mixed into one. So I think I have a little more, I have a clearer goal now.
Yes.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. If you could go back, would you have done it differently?
Oh, I mean, if I could have, yeah, for sure. There were some times where a lot of wasted energy that I could have cleaned up, that I could have focused in the right direction. And we would have a little something more substantial to show for it. But at the time, that wasn't. I wasn't able to do that. Yeah.
I see. Well, present day, would you say the organization is better than when you first took over?
Oh.
That was a long-winded sigh.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to say so. I mean, we have a lot more talented musicians now, and of course, being an ensemble, we have to spend time together to figure each other out, to know what everybody's good at, and really like to know the pieces we play. And yeah, in terms of that, we're definitely better.
So as far as sustainability goes, what would you say would be the key factor in continuing your group and making it grow exponentially after the pandemic?
One of the things we need to do is to write our own music. I'm not a composer, but we do have composers in our group.
Okay.
But the thing is that they're either Western composers. Well, no, they're Western composers, right? Okay. So the music they're in, that it's a Western, it's jazz music. So it's hard to find good music to play as a world music, as a fusion band. So what we've been doing is we've been doing a lot of like rearranging we've been taking some traditional Korean pieces, and then putting some jazz harmonics on top of that, which I think it works, and our group is good at that. But it's like at some point I want us to be able to make music again that's reflective of who we are, and it's very difficult without a composer who's also in that space and who's familiar with both types of music. Yeah, that's one of my long-term goals, I guess. It's to really be able to have our own, to be able to express what we are.
Absolutely. I think,
Yeah,
like I said,
yeah.
passion, that's, something that can hold your group members, I guess, accountable and make it your mission to really implement that, especially in a cultural sense, right? The cross culture between being a Korean and a Canadian, I think that's absolutely valuable in sustaining your group.
Yeah. And I guess, in terms of sustainability, I mean, we got to show up to practice every week. Absolutely. I don't know if we can do that anytime soon, because we're also used to being at home.
Absolutely. So having a regimen, I guess, would be on the list of things, I guess, when you feel that.
Yeah. And a lot of our members have not a lot of our members, but a couple of our members have kids now, and it's just it's much harder when you have kids. Yeah.
I was wondering, do you have any projects that your group and organization got involved in during the pandemic?
During the pandemic, no, unfortunately not. We couldn't really do too much.
Yeah, with the strict Ontario lockdowns, right?
Yes, and a lot of our members, they have older parents and they have kids, so it's hard to ask. It's hard to ask to put them in that position. Like that's one thing that I found is, I just don't want to ask them to do that, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully we get to hear your organization, your band, your group just be in a healthy position to freely express themselves musically and rejoin the group.
Yes, that's our hope as well. Yeah.
I know you don't have any projects currently going on or any past projects during the pandemic, but you mentioned there was the Comfort Woman project, right? How did they approach you on this topic, and what were your, how would you say it was relatable to you?
Well, it's a sensitive issue in the Korean community, and I wasn't too aware of it, just because we don't teach that here in Canada, right? So
I did teach that in history class.
Okay.
I have to give credit to him because every time I hear that, it is the common answer. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I first heard about it through a professor at U of T. He's a professor of ethnomusicology, and he studied he did his perhaps dissertation in Korea on the Comfort Woman and on the music that they had, and that's actually when I first heard about it, which was quite late into my life. Yeah, and yes, this the playwright they know a traditional dancer in Toronto, and she reached out through her to me and saying that she wanted that she was writing a play on the Comfort Woman, and that they wanted to workshop in some elements of traditional Korean music and traditional dance. And yeah, it was always but they didn't have any knowledge of traditional music or traditional dance. So hopefully we'll give them some inspiration and some ideas on how to incorporate that, and just to make it a better piece.
Absolutely. I think that's really important to, talk about subjects that are completely, even if they are uncomfortable, but completely relevant to the Korean history, because I think the fact that the Korean history involves a lot of repression and a lot of fights, even
Yes.
amongst themselves, right? The Korean War, World War II is an obvious one. Communism versus capitalism, right? That's the current lifestyle that they live in, the current climate. It's just became two countries. So I think picking up the smaller pieces from each of the era and really showing it on the stage and showing it in a more vulnerable light, I think that does open up perspective, and I think what you do matters, and I think what your co-workers, I guess, or your co-workers, what they do actually does make an impact because it educates the public.
Yeah, it was for sure, and it's a hard subject to talk about, and it's when I read the script, it was kind of difficult to get through because it's such a hard topic, and so many atrocities that just happened.
Yeah, I think to say that it would be approached in a manner without emotion, but you see the cold hard facts, I think that's the hardest thing to do, especially since there is a lot of emotion around it, and rightfully so, right?
Yes.
So I was wondering, how would you celebrate Asian Heritage Month this year?
Drink some Japanese whiskey. Yeah, I've been getting into whiskey since the lockdown, and it's been great. How would I celebrate Asian Heritage Month? Well, hopefully doing this with you helps. May has always been a busy time for us, and it's weird that it's so empty this year and last year. I don't usually like or prefer to be about identity politics, really be out there and be outspoken. That's not the kind of person I am. But recently, with all the stuff happening, here and in the States, I think maybe it's important that we do talk about it and we do get our voices heard.
What matters is everybody gets treated like a human being. That's essentially it, right?
Yeah.
What is your favorite Korean dish?
Samgyeopsal.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yes, that is a good one.
I'll get some whiskey and go celebrate. It was a pleasure to have you here. So thank you for sharing, John, and thank you for your time. So to our audience, as always, your support is greatly appreciated. And after this, there will be a performance of John and his group, and you will not want to miss this. So please enjoy, keep supporting us. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for future episodes. In the meantime, please be well, practice kindness, openness, safe social distancing protocols, so that we may all be able to gather in person and support wonderful artists like John. Take care!
일심정념은 극락세계라 봉응이 어미루다 연자시와 연풍 연년이 돌아들고 이씨 한양에 든 극시 삼각산 기봉하고 봉황이 생겼구나. 봉황 눌러 대궐 짓고 대궐 앞에 육저로다. 오영문화각산에 갑포가경을 마련할 때 왕십리 정령내고 동궁왕리 백그르다. 종남산하산 과천관악산 화산이 비쳐 동작강 수금하고 한강수 둘러싸니여 천지무궁미력 원나는 금여 찬대 자일은 사바세계 남소는 가부주로다. 해동이면 대한민국 각대각가정과 캐나다 온타리오 토론토로 접어들어 오나 오늘 여기 오신 분들 1년도에 값을 소녀 몽종 대사를 풀고 가자. 몽유자릭 성살살 불화살 거리사 원근 도중에 희별살은 부모들아가 몽상살 몽상 입은 이거 상살 거상거사 달상이라 장이삼조 목채살 동네방네는 불란살 이웃지가는 해달살이라 도정난내는 실몰살 흙을 달아 도살인데 돌 다르면 석살이라 산나무 묵실살 죽을 나무 능터가자. 하늘올라 산실살 들러내리네 돌렁살 홀로내려 용왕살은 바깥마당의 벼락살 앞마당은 해룡살이라 지붕마루는 용총살 혼인대사 주당살은 마루대청 성전엠살 건너망의 근홍살이요 앞방사간 접어들어 이벽 저벽의 벽박살 내외지간 공방살 일기 났는데 삼신살 밭대밑에 동마살 거리거리 선왕살은 만견 참컸던 선왕살 무지개 발로 휘어다가 원광에 소멸하니 건국원명 여러분들 만사가 되길하고 백사가 여일하고 마음과 뜻과 잡순 대로 소원 성취 바로니라. 만재로 거려 만재수야 나 누려라 여루열 사랑만 하십소사 나 봉엉의 어미로다 상남은 도련님이요 하남은 여자 얘기 쓰라자손을 그날이고 태평상대로 잘 사실제 운전 주간 고사덕담 지상장성으로 여주신딜라 나무대가중 나무대 통중 이러니 저러니 액설치설 떠들지라도 건국언명 이대 가정 드시거들랑 밤에 되면 불이나 밝으시고요 낮이 되면 물이나 맑아 밤이 되면 불이 밝고 낮이 되면 물 맑아 물 부른 상극인데 월사 속경 금명갓소 옥쟁반 금쟁반 순금쟁반에다 진주를 굴린듯 마루 위에도 백로가 써 호동나무 상상거지 봉황같이도 잘 사실제 천금같은 아득따님 성령 삼자로 저기 저달만 저다만 그린 듯이 달 거야 사실지라도 느려서 살이만 사십소 사나 미로다 봉 못 사느니 자르명은 잊어주고 김명은 사려 담아서 무생 목숨에 돌끈 달아 백세 상술 누려 살째 명일랑주 시려가던 옛날 옛적 삼천갑자 동방사계 기나 점지를 하시고 복을랑을 주시려거든 왕대 속숭에 복을 주니 만복은 바닥거니와 만복액사를 지쳐줄제 삼재팔란 관제구설 우한질병 잡기 잡신 일체액사를 힘으로다가 금일정성이 대를 바쳐 좋은 선풍이 불거든 월미도 앞강에 소멸을 합시다 명창복에 행여나 북일지라도 5대 뿌리며 3대 뿌리며 동리주강 의주 압록강에다 덩기가 해도도 동시에 내려 버렸습니다.